Good afternoon. I'm Rita Celli. This is Ontario Today. In this hour, is it racist, discriminatory to focus on students based on ethnicity?
We don't need segregation and separation. Our children, they are first-class citizens. I am second-class citizen, but first-class citizen and other children in the school system, they all born here.
A full-blown fight has erupted between some Somali parents and the Toronto District School Board. Close to 200 parents chanting and waving signs at a recent board meeting. Everyone seems to agree there is a problem. Too many Somali students failing, not showing up for school, not finding their way to university. It's the solution that has divided trustees and parents.
I'm a father, I'm a parent. I have 4 kids in Toronto District School Board. I work with the task force. There is no segregation. It's illegal. We're not accepted and we'll never accept it. However, if the student needs help, the system have to provide that help. And that's what all recommendations are all about.
The TDSB is not helping our kids. TDSB failed our kids. The task force is intended to discriminate and stigmatize our children.
We are going to dig a little deeper into what is being proposed and why some parents are so furious about it. We have a parent and trustee in our Toronto studio. Is it racist or discriminatory to focus on students based on their ethnicity? 1-888-817-8995. That's 1-888-817-8995. Variations of this debate keep coming up. The Toronto Board has tried to stop the high dropout rates among Portuguese students. It has set up Afrocentric schools. In Niagara a few years ago, a special school opened for students from low-income families and parents without post-secondary education. Tell us why you are so committed to one side or the other. This is the question. Is it racist or discriminatory to focus on students based on their ethnicity? That toll-free number again, 1-888-817-8995. The Task Force on the Success of Students of Somali Descent. It actually made 23 recommendations, just a couple of them, so we can all frame our conversation on the same threshold. Develop and expand homework support and mentorship programs. Provide youth workers for students of Somali descent. Establish leadership and achievement awards for students of Somali descent. Make the Somali Canadian Student Conference an annual event to celebrate the Somali Canadian experience with all the students. Create a Canadian Somali Heritage Centre and Library. Establish a Somali Heritage Month. And again, there's some 23 recommendations. Our first guest is Ahmed Hussen. He is a lawyer in Toronto and president of the Canadian Somali Congress. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You're also a parent, yes?
Yes, I am.
May I ask, just before we get into all, just a little bit about yourself? I mean, did you go to school in Toronto by chance?
No, I went to high school in the Hamilton Wentworth School Board, and I have a son, and he goes to York Region School Board. So I don't have any children in the Toronto District School Board. However, I've been working intensely over the last number of months with parents who have a number of children in the Toronto District School Board, and I also head a national advocacy body that represents Canadians of Somali background.
Yeah, so what are your concerns? If you can narrow it down even, let's start with the biggest concern that you have about what the school board is proposing to do.
Our concerns, and I'm talking on behalf of thousands of parents who are in the city who are concerned about this task force. The concerns range from the name, the symbolic stuff like the name, to the substantive meat of the recommendations. So why don't we start with the name? I don't understand how they could have called this the Somali Task Force. We're dealing with the subject of young people who were born in Etobicoke and Scarborough and North York and downtown Toronto. It would have been better if they called it the Task Force for Canadian students who are struggling in school.
Well, they could say students of Somali descent.
Well, what does that mean? Do we call Jason Kenney the Minister of Irish Descent? I mean, we shouldn't stigmatize people. And that's, I think, the first concern that these parents had. We are very proud of our heritage, but when we're in public, we have to emphasize our Canadian identity. And
Okay,
If we don't do that, we stigmatize and marginalize people.
But how do you help? I mean, if you look at some of the numbers, I mean, do
Yes.
you accept that there's a problem among students from Somali families, that there's a higher rate than other groups of getting into special education, suspended during the school career? I'm looking at some of the lists here. Below provincial standard achievement on the grade 6 EQAO results. I mean, do you accept that they're struggling more than others?
First of all, I don't think we have enough time in this show to deal with the issues of numbers and so on. The numbers that TDSB has been banding around are suspect, to say the least, because they interviewed 100 students from our community out of a total population of 6,000. They have yet to release the specific numbers for our community with respect to special education. We've made those demands as far back as 2011. So we're kind of dealing with half-baked numbers. So I'm not going to get into the numbers right now. I do acknowledge that there's a problem.
Yeah, I mean,
but here's my concern, and here's the concern of a lot of parents. You can do a lot of damage to an individual or a group in the name of helping them and trying to solve problems.
Why does it worry so much? Tell me what you've seen or experienced.
Well, I'll go through it. First of all students are struggling in the Toronto District School Board. The Toronto District School Board is the worst performing district school board in the whole of the GTA. Those are not my numbers. Those are not the parents' numbers.
But not every student. There are obviously some success stories.
Sure, of course they are. But the issue is, the schools that come under the Toronto District School Board are the worst performing schools relative to other school boards like York Region and Peel Region and so on. Those numbers come from the Fraser Institute's report that came out 2 weeks ago. Secondly, the recommendations themselves, which I'll get into, there's a lot of problems with these recommendations. The main general problems that we have is the recommendations are generally weak. There is little or no information on measuring success or evaluating the effectiveness of the recommendations. And they're not actionable or measurable.
Okay, let me ask you though, this idea, even this statement that it's the worst school board, it's failed.
Yes.
It's a pretty damning conclusion. I mean, when you're basically saying, if I can just say, they're not worthy of your trust. So could the board realistically do anything that would seem to be helping, if that's really how you feel about the results so far?
Yes, of course. First of all, the numbers back me up. We're talking about, numbers as low as 17% for certain schools in our area, 15%, 16%. But let me go back to what I'm saying. I'm not ruling out the possibility of TDSB doing the right thing with respect to our community or any other community, but they have to go about it the right way.
Let me ask you though.
They have to carry out consultations and so on.
Okay, and then this is a whole other kind of debate too, because look, I've been a journalist for a long time. You could have 100 ways to consult, and somebody will be unhappy at the end of it. Just to say,
sure.
Okay. So let's look at some of the proposals. Extra help, let's say for homework or mentorship programs. What would be your concern about that? Surely on the surface, that's better than not having something.
Okay, sure. I'll tell you the issue here. A lot of these recommendations are really good-sounding recommendations that are cover for outsourcing the work that TDSB should be doing. Once you remove educational activity from the school board and you move it to a private corporation, then you lose accountability, you lose measurability. It's really hard to follow that through. On the homework and mentorship program, they're talking about expanding a partnership with the so-called License to Learn, which is basically a company that is run by retired principals, and they're supposed to then train students, volunteer students from the Toronto District School Board, and then turn around and have those students mentor and tutor children from our community. The problem with that is the focus should not be on outsourcing, where it's difficult to measure outcomes and hold people accountable. Instead, the focus should be on TDSB-run after-school programs that focus on giving students individual plans, to fill gaps in their learning.
Let
That's
me
what
ask
they
you
should be
something.
doing.
You know, looking at some of this report, this task force, apparently when they asked the students themselves, the word stigma came up even from the students. They said they already feel stigmatized. Some of them living in low-income housing and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So they're already, in some cases, maybe feeling marginalized. And there is some evidence. We'll hear more about it, and we'll incorporate our callers in a few minutes as well. That at least giving some extra attention could give them a chance to break out of that.
Absolutely, but do we have to do it the right way? How does outsourcing and setting up a Somali heritage center? I mean, the community didn't ask for that.
Can I ask you this? The way I read it, the Heritage Center is actually for Somali Canadian parents to provide resources to help the teachers understand the culture so they could help the students in a more meaningful way.
Here's the issue. The TDSB is playing a game of racism of low expectations. You don't need to teach a kid in Etobicoke about Somalia in order for them to learn math better. You just need to teach them math better, and you need to provide more intense help in the school, in the Toronto District School Board, to do that. Instead of outsourcing things, instead of setting heritage centers and heritage months, we're moving away from the core issue. The core issue is English, math, and science.
Is there something about this you find insulting?
Sure. There's a lot of this that's very insulting. The issue here is TDSB needs to get back into its core mandate of teaching English, math, and science.
But let me ask
How do you do that? You do that by focusing on after-school programs in the school. Don't outsource that work, and don't set heritage centers and heritage months. That doesn't fix the core issue, which is academic.
Let me ask you if that sense of insult or indignation, do you think it might be clouding some of your judgment about what the proposals might actually do, if they could do some good?
I think essentially if the TDSB took the time and they really sincerely, had some humility and came into the community and did adequate consultations. They did some consultations, but not adequately. If they had done that, a lot of these recommendations wouldn't be the way they are. They would have been much better, and we would have been dealing with real solutions instead of having this problem, right?
So you're going to stay in our Toronto studio. I'm going to hold you there. We're going to talk to a trustee in a few minutes, but I also want to take some callers. I can tell you that the phone lines are full. A lot of people relating to this on different levels. We are asking, is it racist or discriminatory to focus on students, struggling students, based on ethnicity? Some of you have had primary experiences. Maybe you're in the school. Maybe you're part of the Somali community. This is a toll-free number, and be patient if you're trying to get through. 1-888-817-8995. You've been listening there to Ahmed Hussen, who is the president of the Canadian Somali Congress. We're going to talk to a trustee in a moment. But first, Lisa, you called in from Ottawa. So obviously not, part of the Toronto board. But how are you hearing this? What do you think it's racist or discriminatory?
I would say it's racist and discriminatory because, I come from an Italian background. So basically, my parents, when they came to Canada, they didn't speak very good English. But they basically put me aside, thinking that because your parents are not able to help you with homework and everything else, that we have to put you aside and give you a better education and teaching you better and things like that. But I'm like, well, you can't just say that because they can't speak English that you're going to do, put me aside and treat me differently because of that.
What do you remember about that as a child? What lingers for you?
Well, in regards to math and English, I wasn't the greatest in those two subjects when I was younger, and basically they wanted to separate me from all the other classrooms, and they wanted my mother and father to sign an agreement saying that because I'm not really good with these two subjects, this record will be taken with me through high school and through university. And my mother did not want that. She didn't want me separated from other people or treated differently because of, their background.
And so what happened ultimately?
Well, she didn't sign the paperwork, and then I ended up being treated the same like everybody else, and I ended up going to university and, going through the whole process like everyone else did.
Okay.
So.
Okay, Lisa, thank you. Lisa calling in, relating from her own experience. She's a child of Italian immigrants. Robert, you're on the line in Toronto. Is it racist or discriminatory to focus on students based on ethnicity?
It's pretty trite to say that it's discriminatory. Absolutely, it's discriminatory, and we discriminate on all kinds of bases. The media is discriminated positively when they try and get access to certain things, and that's a good thing. The question is, from my perspective, whether it's discriminatory or not, but whether it's helpful or harmful discrimination. And from my perspective, I think it's very helpful. I think that when you identify a problem and you associate it with a particular group, and then you identify a solution for that problem and implement it, that's always good.
What's been your experience? How do you relate to this one?
Well, my kids never went to public school. My kids always went to private school. They went to the Jewish day school system. And the discrimination there, from my perspective, was that they had a separate kind of education from what public school kids had that was beneficial to my kids and my situation. And that was very good. And I applaud the public school for putting together separate programs like this. And I hope that at some time they can put together a program that my kids or people like my kids could take benefit from a program developed in the public system for their needs.
Okay, Robert.
Which for my kids was a Jewish education.
Okay, and you're going to that helpful and harmful. We played with that language, but we're also picking up on the language that the parents have used, that it's discriminatory, that it's racist, it's marginalizing. Mohammed, you're in Toronto. What do you think? Is it discriminatory or racist to focus on students based on ethnicity?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I myself went through the Toronto District School Board starting from ESL in the early 90s. And what I needed for help is that it has to be something that individually customized to catch up with other students, and then basically integrate to the wider classroom. But here's what's happening is that I think people get used to it, one size fits all. We do exactly the same, and then that's when you lose a lot of people to drop out, because if it's one size fits all, then there's going to be no accountability. And one of the alarming things that I'm seeing, so definitely from my point of view as a parent and as a student who went through the system, that's my point of view. Here's the second point.
You like the idea that it's some of this?
Definitely do, and I support 100% of that. And it's going to be for every individual student who is struggling. Here's what I have a problem with, though. I think the person you're interviewing is the Canadian Somali Congress?
Yes.
Okay. If the name Somali Task Force it's discriminatory, then his organization name is also discriminatory. So the question I would ask is that, are you going to change your name as well? Because it's also, if the name stigmatized, then you also are stigmatizing.
Well, let's get a quick response from you, Ahmed Hussen.
Well, the organization is called Canadian Somali Congress. So the emphasis is on Canadian, the ethnicity is Somali, but we don't. This is called the Somali Task Force. So we're talking about totally two different things.
I wanted to get a response. Let me bring in Maria Rodrigues. She's a Toronto school trustee, a member of this task force. The full name is Success of Students of Somali Descent. You've been hearing some of the arguments. You know some of it already. How do you answer the question, is it racist or discriminatory to focus on students based on ethnicity?
Thank you, Rita. No, it is not discriminatory or racist to focus on students of Somali descent to assist them, or any other community that needs assistance. At the TDSB, we are there to ensure the success of all of our students from all different groups. And if there are issues in some communities that we need to address, then we establish task forces, as we have for the Portuguese community and for the Somali descent community, to give more resources, like you said at the beginning, mentoring programs, homework programs, a resource center with Somali curriculum, Heritage Month. Many communities in Toronto have a Heritage Month. It's part of our culture in Toronto to have Heritage Months. We have the Portuguese Heritage Month in June. We have the Jewish Heritage Month in April, I believe, Asian Heritage Month in May. And those communities are very happy to have those Heritage Months where they can assist the students in learning about their backgrounds and also having, great self-esteem, celebrating their backgrounds.
Well, some you've heard this argument say, well, there's Black Heritage Month. It suffices. We don't need a Somali Heritage Month. Is the board trying too hard?
There was discussion about that at the task force, and so because there are, there's Afrocentric people from Africa, people from the Caribbean, so people want to celebrate their own country's heritage, and that's how we came to the Somali Heritage Month. People want to have their own Heritage Month.
Can you describe why you're such a believer in kind of targeted help? You pointed to the Portuguese
Yes.
example, and I wonder if that's why. Can you talk about that?
Okay, so I am someone who has immigrant parents who came to Canada in 1959, and I was born here. I went through the TDSB, elementary and high school, and graduated from University of Toronto. My parents were, from the working class, and I know what it was like to go through the system, and there was racism and discrimination, and I feel that when we're doing this, we are also, like, the Portuguese community also has a high dropout rate, as does the Somali community. So when we have these programs, we're giving help to the students that don't have that help at home, that need that help. There is systemic discrimination. We can't deny that. And that's one of the ways that we're addressing it, is to provide extra supports to students who may be, not victims, but be, disadvantaged due to systemic discrimination. So that's why we want more teachers with Somali descent to be teachers in the TDSB, or Portuguese descent, or Spanish speaking, or Caribbean descent, because we want there to be role models for the students to see that they have choices in life, that they can become successful, that they can go to community college or university. They have choices, and they don't have to drop out of school and then end up without choices and with more difficult lives.
I want to squeeze this in. It's a short story from a parent who is upset with what the board is doing. Just listen, then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
My daughter is in Scarlet Heights School. 3 weeks before, what happened, the principal took the microphone, said, students of Somali descent, if you want to come to the office, we want to ask you questions. If you answer those questions, we will give you $10 kubo subway. That is absolutely wrong. And they want to say, after they build those, we did a research, and the research gave us this. And we have seen that the Somali descent students are not good enough, so we want to help them in order to justify their discriminatory policy.
That's a parent describing a situation at his daughter's school. Your trustee, Maria Rodrigues, Your reaction to that story?
Well, I find that a little bit odd. I haven't heard that story, so I'm not aware of that happening. But if the students were feeling that they were being targeted or they're not being treated in a decent way, then that's something that should definitely go to the superintendent. I can look into that.
Fair enough, because you could see if it's true, like on the you could see how that would get up someone's nose. For sure. So first, I would have to determine if that is actually what happened, and if it is, then we'll have to discuss with the principal and the teachers at the school what is happening, why did they do that, who came up with that idea, and rectify the situation, because it's not about students not being good enough. The students from all communities are smart, are intelligent, are hardworking, but we want to be there as a board to help them succeed to the best that they can, get the best public education that they can. I think we have a teacher on the line with us. Diana in Toronto, are you a teacher?
Yes, I am.
You teach with the board?
Yes, I do.
So tell us your perspective on this. Is it racist or discriminatory to focus on a student's ethnicity?
I don't think that the TDSB is intending to be racist. I think they're trying to help the community. I think that the community it's a complicated issue, having a lot of students in one community that are not successful in school. As a teacher, I worked in a school that was predominantly Somalian, and although all those programs were offered, we had after-school help and, coming in at lunch or recess. I always offered extra help, and I rarely got any attendance from students of Somalian heritage. So I think that's why they're trying to separate that and make it a specific thing just for those students. Also, there was a situation where a student was unsuccessful in a teacher's classroom, and only after the first term, in other words, the first report card, which comes out in January, the parents insisted that the student would do better with a male teacher. So they asked for the student to be moved into a different classroom.
Diana,
and in fact, that's what happened.
Diana, I'm going to ask you to stay on the line with us. You've got a primary story, obviously, dealing with some of this right at the ground zero, if we can call it, in the classroom. So Diana in Toronto, you stay on the line. We're asking you about this debate that has erupted at the Toronto District School Board among some Somali parents and the board. Is it racist or discriminatory to focus on students based on ethnicity?
It has to be for all Canadians, not specific groups.
A passionate debate has erupted in Toronto about how best to help Somali students struggling at school.
the task force is intended to discriminate and stigmatize our children. We are Canadians, by the way. Our children are Canadian-born citizens.
In this hour of Ontario Today, is it racist, discriminatory to focus on students based on ethnicity?
I heard about the segregation and I heard about discrimination, but I just want to remind you, if you look back about Afrocentric school, it was exactly like that. Everybody was thinking, Afrocentric school, it's going to be all black schools, all kids are from Africa, they're not learning about the Canadian. Guess what? I was reading Toronto Star a few days ago, and it was one of the most achievers are there. So I know the fear where it comes from, but the reality is that doing nothing is not an option. And also, this country, segregation is illegal, discrimination is illegal, so the system will take care of that.
What has been your experience? Variations of this debate have festered for a very long time. 1-888-817-8995. Is it racist or discriminatory to focus on students based on ethnicity? We have two guests in studio on the opposite ends of this debate. Opposed, Ahmed Hussen, a parent lawyer, president of the Canadian Somali Congress. In favor, Maria Rodrigues, a school trustee and member of that task force on the success of students of Somali descent. I want to go back to you, Diana. You're a teacher in Toronto. You were giving us an example before we broke for the news about a suggestion from, I think it was a parent who said their students should have a male teacher would be more helpful. And what happened after that at the school?
Well, the student was moved into a classroom where there was a male teacher, and unfortunately, he wasn't any more successful than he was originally. I just wanted to mention that part of the accommodations they're making, for example, I was listening to Mr. Hussein speak on Metro Morning here in Toronto, and I know the Somalian community had asked for scholarships. And so part of the resolution with this was that they were offering them scholarships. So it's something that they actually asked for. So I think the TDSB is actually trying to help. They're trying to make things better. And if it's coming off, it's being interpreted as racist. I don't think that is the intent.
So just very quickly before I let you go, so as a teacher who worked in a school that had a lot of Somali families, how did you find it? Like, did you feel well equipped to understand, the nuances maybe of the culture to help the students?
Look, I'm from an immigrant family myself. My parents immigrated here actually from Europe, and I didn't even speak English when I started school. I went to school in Montreal, and I learned both English and French, and there were never any accommodations made. But that's just the way things used to be. I think that we tried. I mean, at Christmas, I made 118 phone calls home, and I had a lot of parents really appreciating, because I taught a lot of students. I teach on Rotary. So I made a lot of phone calls home. I had a lot of parents being very gracious and appreciating the fact that I was calling them. And unfortunately, so I thought my problem was solved. And unfortunately, I still didn't get sort of if I was asking for a student to come in and see me, or if I was asking for extra work that was missing, or whatever it was. So in fact, I wasn't sure how to handle the situation. I didn't know. I don't know what could be different. I tried to, understand and speak to the students themselves, but, to no avail, because it continued.
Well, let me go to you, Ahmed Hussen, maybe, because what Diana, the teacher's describing there, is some level of frustration in dealing with families, too, and feeling, not sure that they understand maybe the partnership of education in some sense.
First of all, let me deal with two things that the teacher brought up. On the issue of scholarships, this is exactly a really good example of racism of low expectations. They're going to set up a scholarship and an award system that's only restricted to Canadians of Somali descent. So the message there is, you're not good enough for the regular awards. We'll give you a lower level award so that you can feel good about yourself. These kids have the potential to benefit greatly from functioning and not failing schools. If they have an institution that truly cares, they would push them to their full potential, regardless of where they come from.
Okay, secondly, let's get a response on that from you, Maria Rodrigues. This criticism of the scholarship.
Okay, well, We have scholarships for students, all types of scholarships, including based on community if you're taking certain courses and so on. So I think that giving scholarships is a positive thing, and it goes again to self-esteem and raising self-esteem. We're here to support the students, and as a parent with a TDSB student, I know what the system is about. I know my kids are Portuguese background myself, and my husband is Spanish speaking. So we have a special program for both communities at Central Tech with the teacher mentors and so on, very successful. At the school that my daughter goes to, there are awards for French, for all different languages, for all different backgrounds. So that already exists in the board, and that's something, I guess, that the parents know exists, and they would also like to see it for their community. So we work with the parents. We had, a year of consultations. We extended the task force by 6 months. We had 8 consultations. Hundreds of people attended. I don't know where Mr. Hussen gets his thousands from. I'm not really sure about that number. I'm not sure about his numbers. Our numbers in terms of dropout, all the numbers we have are done by professional researchers, et cetera, at the board, professionals in education who come up with this. There's no reason for us to not have real numbers and so on. So again, I'm concerned that Mr. Hussen is sort of, from my perception, from my looking at things, interpretation, he's sort of presenting himself as a TDSB parent, but he's not a TDSB parent. TDSB is very different from other boards. We are the leaders in education.
And in fairness, he did say when we started out this program that he doesn't have a child at the board. Let's go back to the phones, and I thank you. I know this is passionate for both of you, and leaving enough space to bring in our callers. I'm grateful for that. Our number is 1-888-817-8995. I can tell you that judging by the phones and the lineup, again, if you're trying to get through, be patient, because obviously this is hitting a nerve. Hussen, you're calling from Ottawa. How do you interpret this from your own experience? This idea. Is it racist or discriminatory to focus on the student's ethnicity, even if you're trying to help?
Well, racist or discriminatory, those are very strong terms. I wouldn't use those words. I think the board members are ill-informed, not necessarily ill-intentioned. I think we would all agree on that. But I would hope they would revisit Martin Luther King's speech, where he says that he hopes one day his children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And I think that race or ethnicity are one is just as random and arbitrary as the other, and is not at all an indication of academic potential or performance or so forth.
What's been your experience?
Now, I'll tell you my experience. My experience has been that I was an ESL student myself. English is my second language, and I count my blessings that when I was going through the school system, there was no Arab task force, and I will tell you why. Because I was able to form my own identity without any labels being imposed on me from the outside. And I have a very rich identity that is first and foremost Canadian. Then there are some other qualifications to it. But I had complete agency over who I became. I think it's very unfair to Somali students in the TDSB for them to have this label attached to them. Because it's a very random and arbitrary element, it could have pernicious outcomes, such as the principal calling down Somali students to the office to answer some questions. I think it's widespread. I've seen it in the media. The Toronto Star routinely refers to young Somali men involved in crime in the GTA, and now it's being replicated in the school system. I'm just breathless because the age of paternalism is over, and here we are revisiting this debate, and I don't think it's acceptable at all.
When did you go to school, Hussen? How old are you?
I'm in my late 20s.
Yeah, okay. Listen, thanks for calling in. I'm just going to leave it at that, to some thoughtful observations from many of our callers on the whole spectrum here. 1-888-817-8995. Natalie, you're in Toronto. Is it racist or discriminatory from your point of view to focus on a student's ethnicity, even if you're trying to help?
No, I don't think it's racist or discriminatory. If anything, I think it'll help to erase the negative stigma that surrounds Somali youth. This program is a program that will benefit these youth, and to be honest, why wouldn't anybody want a program that is free of charge that will support our youth? This is clearly a community in need of support, and this program will help eliminate that negativity, including the high dropout rates.
So are you a teacher? Are you a parent? Like, why do you care and know about this, I guess?
I've been a youth worker with newcomer and mainstream youth for 10 years of my professional career. And I've done mentorship programs as well as homework clubs, and I've seen the success that this additional support can do for youth.
So you heard Hussein from Ottawa, so he's not connected to the Toronto board, but he's just in his late 20s, and he's saying he's really grateful that he wasn't put in a group of quote Arab kids and labeled that this is stigmatizing, that the age of paternalism should be over. What are your thoughts when you hear him make a case like that?
It makes sense. I don't necessarily agree that the title needs to have Somali youth attached to it, but if this is a community, any community that has such a high dropout rate, like 25% dropout rate in high school is attached to Somali youth. So in order to eliminate that huge dropout rate and to better these youth, in a group or not, to target them, I think would be a benefit.
So that the help would outweigh any other harm.
I think so, yes.
Okay, Natalie, thanks for your call.
Thank you.
1-888-817-8995. Andrew, over to you. You're also in Toronto. What's your perspective on this? Is it discriminatory or racist to focus on a student's ethnicity?
Well, I agree with your last guest who said I do believe it is discriminatory and racist are strong words. But I sympathize and agree wholeheartedly with your guest, Ahmed. I mean, the Toronto board has been trying to create a curriculum over the last 10, 15 years that they're trying to get children to assimilate to. I find children are failing in all areas. I don't think you should be targeting certain groups and singling them out and creating all these different categories for them to be seated in. My children go to a public school. It's very ethnic diverse, and I would be offended if they ever came up and said, there's one group of children that are not doing well, so we're going to do something with them. I mean, even my own children have had difficulties with the curriculum over the last 5, 6, 7 years, which I've seen become quite a problem with the writing, the spelling, the mathematics. They don't even do timetables anymore.
But there's all kinds of separating of kids. I mean, we hear about boys who need to be educated perhaps in different ways, or some boys.
Absolutely, Michael Rice.
Yeah,
Michael Rice,
who we've had on this program. So, I mean, lines are drawn in all sorts of cases. If a kid is struggling, I mean, how do you help them without identifying them in some way?
You assimilate them. These people want to be Canadians. These children want to be Canadians. These parents want them to be Canadians. We all sit together and work these problems out. They have after-school programs. If the children aren't participating in them, then perhaps the parents will have to get involved. But it should be done within the school. Now, all schools are micromanaged. That's another problem there. They all have their own set of values and their own set of rules as far as I'm concerned. But this should be done within the school. We should not be setting up separate areas for these people to be segregated in. I don't believe in that. I'm a fourth-generation Canadian born. I've lived here my whole life. My children are born here, and I love the assimilation factor. And I have seen so much disassimilation over the last 10 years with groups and months for this and months for that. Why aren't we all just working togetger in one building? That's what they want.
I want to go to Maria Rodrigues. Andrew is a critic of what the board is doing. How do you respond?
Well, I think no organization is perfect, no school board is perfect, but I think we do an excellent job. We have model schools for the inner city throughout Toronto to assist communities that need more support, and very successful schools that also offer, health care, hearing and vision tests and so on, access to family doctors. We have all kinds of programs to support students, and if there are issues that that this gentleman has, then he should really become part of the parent advisory council that we have at the board to help improve things, because we as staff, as trustees and staff, need to hear from parents all the time. And one of the issues that I wanted to bring out is that many of the recommendations also in this task force are to assist with parental engagement, so to help Somali descent parents get more involved in their children's education, have parent academies and so on, have interpreters and translators available for all activities, send translated letters home, have all kinds of information in Somali, and have regular meetings maybe twice a week in these parent academies so that parents have, access to the education system, that they're not intimidated, that they feel comfortable, that they can be engaged in their kids' education.
Okay, let's take another caller. Mohad, where are you calling us from?
Hi, yes, I'm calling from Toronto.
Okay, tell us how you're feeling about this. I mean, is it racist? Is it discriminatory?
What I was going to say is I don't think that you can internalize an institutional problem and direct it towards a community, because the same problem that the Somali community is currently facing, the Caribbean community has faced as well, the Italian community has faced, the Portuguese community is facing, and I think the Afghan students right now are facing it as well. So it's an institutional issue where the TDSB doesn't have the gears and the policies in place in order to deal with all these students who are from different backgrounds. And specifically for the Somali kids, like some of the schools that have a high population of Somali kids, like North Albion Collegiate, had for the year 2011-2012 a rating of 3.1 out of 10, according to the Fraser Institute. And there's a school called Nelson A. Boylan, which is at Jane M. Falstaff, which has a large majority of Somali youth. And that school had a rating of 0 out of 10 for 5 consecutive years, from the year 2007 to the year 2012. That school had a rating of 0 out of 10, and that school has so many Somali kids. So the schools are inherently defective, and the fact that Somali kids are in those schools does not mean that they are defective.
What's your perception of the teachers?
You have the TDSB itself has produced a bunch of articles where they were saying that the majority of the teachers that teach in the TDSB are usually women, and they're white. So you have a representation issue where the teachers cannot relate to these kids, because when you have 80% of the teachers who are white women and you have all these black Somali kids in class, there's a misunderstanding. They cannot communicate with each other. So the fact that there's no Somali teachers, there's no black teachers, this just adds to the fire, right? It's fuel to the fire. But the schools, it's not, because the thing is, it's the same thing that was tried with the Caribbean community is being tried with the Somali community. And an institutional defectiveness cannot be imposed on a community, right?
So like they're talking about trying to bring, people with more of the similar background. Are you Somali yourself? I'm sorry, I missed that if you said.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes,
and
I'm Somali.
Do you have any kids in the system or?
No, but I lived here for 14 years. I went to middle school here. I went to high school here. And I've witnessed a lot of my peers come into school with great potential and leave schools traumatized because their potential was not, they weren't given the tools and the help and the assistance and the actual just fair quality of education that they needed.
Did you feel like stigmatized as a Somali?
Of course. When I went to C.W. Jeffries and I went to Western Collegiate, which are 2 schools in the west end of Toronto, and my parents had to take me from Toronto to Kitchener in order for me to get a good quality of education. And when I went there, it was in Kitchener that I had teachers who were nice to me, who tried to foster my hunger to learn and these things. So some of the schools and you have schools that are teachers that can do whatever they want, principals that are suspending kids for small, trivial things, and these are all things that are not addressed. Their defectiveness within the TDSB, there's nothing in place in order to hold a principal accountable when he or she suspends a kid for 20 days because they came to class late or because they did something inappropriate that's very trivial, right?
And so you're saying that these things, you observe them, and I think you're getting at it, become self-perpetuating in some ways. Let's bring in Ahmed in Toronto on the line, actually. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, my name is Ahmed. I am an educator, researcher, and a product of the TDSB myself. I'm truly, truly excited that we are now having conversations as a society about Canadian kids of Somali descent. So it's not what's wrong with them. I think now we're having a debate about their educational attainment, where the system has failing them, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and what is essentially going on. So this is a highlighted debate. I think the very question of whether it's racist or not, I see that a bit problematic, because I think when you have a particular segment of society not achieving in school, not being able to realize their potential, then is that racist or not when you have 25% of the kids being pushed out, according to the TDSB? Is that racist or not? How do we account for those systemic challenges? What does that mean in terms of the classroom, in terms of pedagogy, in terms of curriculum, in terms of centering our students in their education? And enabling them to realize their humanity through education and to achieve.
Ahmed, you're with
Canadians.
you're a researcher, right?
Yes.
Like these are actually questions you're asking professionally. You work with OISE?
Yes.
Okay, so this is an institute that many of our listeners may know. It does a lot of education-based research. So what do you think of this approach? We're using the word racist and discriminatory because this is the criticism from some of the Somali parents. And, in fact, you heard Mohad just before you. He went through the system. He said, the system itself can behave in a racist way. He says, you have people from the outside of a culture maybe, suspending kids for what he called trivial reasons. And then, you create maybe a systemic problem. I mean, what's your insight?
I do agree with a lot of what Mohad has said. I mean, I do remember being marked as a Somali kid and being seen as violent underachiever. But I also remember the teachers that really, really cared about me, that gave me the opportunity to excel, that allowed me to dream, right? That mentored me. Those are Canadian teachers, and I think. So
where do you fall on? Yeah. Where do you fall on this then? Like, do you like what the board is doing, or are you also, like one of our guests, really concerned?
I think it's about time that the board did something about all this, and I think putting recommendations forward is one step. The struggle for parents and all the students continues, and I think it's a step forward in the right direction.
Okay, thanks for your call as well. Ahmed in Toronto, he's a lead researcher, Canadian Somali, as he said, and he works at OISE, attracting a lot of interesting calls. I want to tell you that once we're off the air, we will post this again. The audio is available as a podcast. You can stream it. You can leave comments at cbc.ca/Ontario Today. Maybe let's go. I want to get a thought from you to go back to you, Ahmed Hussen, who you're in our studio. You're, again, a lawyer and president of the Canadian Somali Congress, and you're speaking for a lot of the concerned parents.
Yes.
What are you hearing? I mean, you're hearing both sides. You had a youth worker saying, look, they need help. Yes, there's stigma, but this is going to be more helpful. Then you have got, callers who are perhaps more in line with you. Like, what is the middle ground? I mean, if you could change something today, because you could consult for another 4 years, but maybe nothing will change. Kids need help today, right?
But that's the thing, right? I think the concern that there's two things that the callers expressed, which I totally agree with. All these parents are saying is, treat us as Canadians. I was listening to Trustee Rodrigues calling our kids Somalis and so on and so forth. This is exactly what the problem is. We don't want to have a country of Portuguese and Somalis and Chinese. We should be all Canadians. Secondly...
But again, if she called them Somali Canadians, would you feel differently?
No, she didn't. She called them Somalis.
If she did.
Well, that would have been... Well, what does that mean? When you call Jason Kenney... Jason Kenney Irish
Jason Kenney's not here. We're not talking about him.
Well, okay, please don't interrupt. I didn't interrupt you. On the second recommendation of the task force, it talks about exploring less traditional styles of teaching to benefit Somali students and introducing and developing hands-on types of programming such as family studies, woodworking, mechanics, metalworking. This is a clear indication that TDSB does not expect our kids to do well in school, and it perpetuates the academic bottom streaming instead of and being dumped into applied courses. The institution that has failed our kids is TDSB, 5.5 out of 10. According to the Fraser Institute, instead of wearing that and being humble enough to come back into the community and reaching real solutions, they label us. They keep talking about heritage centers and so on instead of focusing on math and English. The day they focus on real solutions inside the school that bring in people in as Canadians instead of labeling them and stigmatizing them, that's the day we'll have success on this issue. We're not the subject here. The TDSB should be the subject, not the Canadian Somali students.
Okay, Maria Rodrigues, just a brief response, and I'll go back to the phones.
Thank you. I just want to say with regards to the Fraser Institute, one of the schools in my ward, Bloor Collegiate, went from a 4 to a 7 because we are a safe and caring school board and we do care about our students. And I think I did say Somali descent, but we had trustees from all political stripes say that they are in favor of these recommendations. And if you speak to the Premier, maybe you should ask her if she's in favor of the recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. Musadik, you're in Toronto. Tell us your perspective. Where do you come at this? Is it racist or discriminatory to focus on students based on ethnicity?
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. Yes, it is not racist because I don't believe that the TDSB has a motive to be racist in the application of this. But I think it is not right the way the task force was even structured in the first instance. Because my question is this: why are these Somali students, students of Somali descent, like Somalian Canadian students, are failing? Is it because they are Somalian or what? The TDSB did not identify the problem, because it is the same thing. The task force, who are going to be members of this task force, the same set of teachers that are teaching them right now, they're still going to do the same thing anyway. So the point is that it's not by creating a task force that would discriminate students based on their ethnicity or background that will actually solve this solution. Because I want to know if they are failing because they are Somali.
What do you think? Are you Somali yourself?
No, I'm not. I'm a Nigerian, but I have kids. My kids are in school here too. So they are blacks. I believe in Afrocentric school too, but the structure of Afrocentric school is better than what by single-handedly taking Somali out of African setting and say, the statistics obviously shows that they are failing or they are dropping out of school. But what is the problem? Is it because they are Somalian? Is it because they cannot learn? Or is it because the system is not taking their situation into consideration or their background?
Yeah, I mean, let me just be, if I can, because that's a big question you're asking. We're wrapping up. You said you're in favor of the Afrocentric schools. Have you seen success in that respect?
Yes. For example, when you look at Afrocentric school, it's actually basically to teach people about the culture, to inculcate the culture into the education system. Therefore, students of different culture, of African descent can actually learn, not necessarily for African descent alone. Students that are not even from Africa could go there and actually learn something about, I believe so much in multicultural, the multiculturalism of Canada, which is one of the things that make Canada one of the greatest place to live in the world. But by now single-handedly picking out the particular ethnicity and saying they are failing, we need a task force for them and this, what about if parents tell their children not to participate in that? So in that situation, what is the school board going to do?
Okay,
like if I'm in Somalia and I tell my kids...
I have to hold you there. I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off, but we're out of time. Thank you all for joining us. I want to thank our studio guests, Ahmed Hussen. Thank you for joining us. You're with the Canadian Somali Congress, and Maria Rodrigues, a school trustee and member of that task force that came up with these recommendations. Thank you to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, if you want to hear it, send it to your friends, add a comment. You can go to cbc.ca/Ontario Today. We have all the recordings there of our program. You tune in every day at noon to 1 o'clock. Tomorrow, something we're hoping many of you will also join into. You know, Barbie. What is it with Barbie? So still, 55 years later now, so much debate about her. We're going to ask you the simple question: is she welcome in your home? Why or why not? Take care, everyone. Bye for now.